everybody, I'm Andrew Cagle from For the Love of Gear, and today we are sitting with Zach Balch. Zach is a Dallas singer-songwriter from Dallas, of course, I just said that. But one thing I really love about Zach is the first time we met, it was at a coffee shop, and I was working the door, and he was playing, and the first time I heard him, there was something about the way he played and the way he sung and his songwriting that really just captures you. I remember after about like 2 songs, I felt like I knew him on a personal level, that his songwriting was just that intelligent and that raw. And so all that to say, I'm really excited to have Zach here interviewing today, and we're just going to talk through some stuff and get to know Zach Balch.
Thanks for coming to my house.
Yeah, dude.
This was easy.
Yeah, easy peasy, man. It's a beautiful place.
I had to do no work other than like putting on pants and making some tea, so I appreciate it.
And thank you for the tea.
Man, it's good tea, isn't it?
It sure is. Orange.
I forgot exactly what it's called, but the guy, he referred to himself as the tea guy, and you can find him at the Dallas Farmers Market every Saturday. So really good.
There you go, tea guy.
Really good.
Dallas Farmers Market every Saturday.
Yeah, the tea guy. Don't forget about it.
Cool. Well, Zach, tell us a little bit about how you got into music.
Well, I grew up in Texas, and so I think everybody in Texas really only takes one path of getting into music, and generally that's starting off in church music. I had a cousin, Chris, that was playing guitar and was fantastic. He had this great Gibson LG1, like an early '60s model, sunburst, small body, almost parlor guitar size Gibson guitar, and it was beautiful. And he played, and I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And so I wanted to start playing guitar. And so, I got a cheap little starter pack for Christmas, the little Fender DG8 that comes with the gig bag and the free picks and stuff.
Yeah.
And a tuner and a strap or whatever. And started playing guitar, and I was of course really terrible at it, but I was adamant that I could hang with Chris in the worship band at the church, and I was like 14. So I showed up, and I'd learned like G, C, D, E minor, and from what they tell me, that's all you need, in church music. And they threw me a curveball, and they gave me a sheet of paper that had E and A and B and F sharp and C sharp written on it, and I had never seen those chords before, and I just assumed that they were the same things as like G and stuff. So I was playing in G the whole time, and Chris was still playing the E, and so it was pretty far off, but he was gracious enough to kind of guide me along and give me input, and we played together in that church for 2 more years before Chris graduated, and went to South Plains College, and then later he went on to Belmont in Nashville and studied music there. And so I always got to watch Chris, and Chris was always light years ahead of me, and he was always the one that I looked up to and I wanted to play like and be like, sure enough, years down the road, Chris was able to play guitar on my first record a little bit, which is pretty cool. So
that's awesome.
Kind of came full circle. He's living in Austin and playing down there now, so he's doing it. But that's where I got started. I was doing church music and watching Chris and having somebody kind of bring me along, and ever since Chris, it's always been that way. I've always kind of found someone. Our tea's ready.
Our tea is ready.
And so we have. You're fine.
Yeah, we're chilling.
Karina's here helping make tea, but she's staying out of frame.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to step on any toes here, but she wouldn't be.
No.
But yeah, it's always been that way. I always had a guy or two that were so much better than me that I got to watch and steal their tricks and whatnot. And I have that now. Tyler Martin, Andrew Sapolsky are kind of that for me right now, and Adam Roy is becoming that way. Guys that are just, I didn't know you could play guitar that way. You think that you know what you know, and then someone comes along and shows you what they know, and you're like, oh, I'm terrible at this instrument. And so it's a humbling experience, and I soon found out that I wasn't meant to be a guitar player. But I talked a lot back then, and still do. Exhibit A. And so I thought I might be better suited as a songwriter, as a storyteller. So my dream of becoming a guitarist were short-lived and quite fell apart. But the songwriter I think has worked out a little better for me.
Yeah, and you're a brilliant songwriter.
Thank you.
I love just. I feel like I'm reliving like high school English class a little bit sometimes when I'm listening to your songs, because they're filled with these incredibly in-depth metaphors and even just words that make me feel like I'm illiterate sometimes, but they're just incredible in the way that you portray yourself through these songs, and the way that you write is just incredible and raw. Like I said, like I really felt like I knew you after just a few songs. And I mean, how do you get to that place to where, like, what gets you to the place where you're writing songs? Like, how does that process
Man,
look?
I mean, I wish I had a really good way to answer that, but I mean, the truth of it is, like, I really struggle with, am I telling the truth in my songwriting, or am I just, writing for the sake of writing a song?
Yeah.
To hear you say that you think that you know me very well after hearing those, I guess means that I was doing a better job of it than I feel like I'm doing, which is good. That's what I want to accomplish, is being transparent yet relevant to others as well. So getting to that place for me is really being honest about what I'm going through, but imagining it as if I were another person.
Yeah.
What would I want someone to tell me, or what kind of story would I want to hear if someone were telling me about leaving their home in West Texas, or if someone were telling me, a funny joke about the girl that was persistent and they ended up just dating and later becoming engaged 2 years later, and then bailing on it, essentially. And so I mean, those are funny stories, and those are things that everybody goes through. But at the same time, they're potent if you're familiar with that story, or your personal story, and then someone comes along and they kind of share that perspective, yet say it differently, So I think that's really the perspective that I try to take is as if I were someone else, and maybe that's not a perspective I try, and maybe that's something I kind of long for, is to be somebody else. Maybe everybody's that way too, and so maybe for me, songwriting is escapism as well as trying to give perspective to folks. I don't know. It's a tough question.
Well, even one thing that we were talking about the other day was, you said yourself that you don't listen to a ton of music. You're very selective in what you listen to, and even more so, we had kind of discussed how that kind of influences, the lack of influences your songwriting, because you're not exactly trying to be somebody else.
Right.
To the degree to where it also kind of, it really makes you as a person step out and create your own sound.
I think so. I hope so. I hope that it sounds different. I hope that it's not just an arrogant attempt to say that I'm above or outside of a box or something. But the real truth of the matter is, I'm not a tremendous audiophile, and a lot of folks that are going to see this video are going to be kind of angry at me for saying that, because a lot of casual conversations I have with people are about music. They assume that I know a lot about pop culture or pop music or jazz or old country or whatever, because I reference it sometimes. But the truth is, I don't listen to a lot of music. I never really did. I had my favorites as a kid, but I don't really have the favorites now. And so people are going to be like, what? You don't listen to music? What, are you crazy? Whatever. But I think if you do it for a living, it's a different thing. And that's probably really wrong. I don't think any other musicians really share that sentiment.
Yeah. And part of being a musician too is you start turning from like listening to music to knowing musicians. And so sometimes because as for me, like, I know you as a musician, I know you personally, and I know your music, but to know you on a personal level now, I don't always just say like I listen to Zach Balch. Like it's almost like a personal thing. Like I know you, I know your musicians,
right?
And not to say you're off like touring the world with James Taylor or anything, and that you know James Taylor on a personal level, but there is just something. I think something about when you start to play and you become one with the musical community a little bit, it almost seems like, there's a little paramount shift in a way.
Absolutely. I think my lack of music listening has been a tremendous detriment until the last year or so. My first record was pretty simple.
I think the story writing was good because I had read a lot, and I had heard a lot of professional speakers deliver messages, whether that was a church or a conference or a seminar or whatever, so I was used to hearing other people express through words a point, and so I garnered a lot of information on how to convey a thought through those people. And the same thing should be true for listening to music. You really should learn what is effective in communicating musical ideas by listening to a lot of music. And I didn't really do that. And so I think my earlier music was not as potent as it's becoming now. And it's not because I listened to a lot of music, but because of what you just said and being more enriched by the community around me. And I've gained a lot of appreciation for guys like yourself, or for Andrew Sapolsky or Tyler Martin as musicians, or Adam Roy as a guitar player, or Karina Michaela, as a songwriter, or Garrett Owen as a songwriter here in town, or Kayla Khan as a songwriter, or tons of other people here in town that write great music, but also write very potent story forms as well, and particularly guys like Ryan Poole and Burt Willis, who I played in a band with, because they're brilliant musicians, and learning how music works on a mathematical level is what really does help to say, like, I'm going to give the punchline here with this inversion or this substitution, and I didn't know that a year ago, and I still don't know much at all. I know like 3 tricks, and I use them a lot on the new record. And next time I make a record, I think I'll know 3 more tricks or 6 more tricks, and hopefully the music will become more potent, as will the lyrics, because I'm growing older and I have more experiences of hearing how thoughts are conveyed effectively, and I'll steal those tricks and make them my own as well. So though I don't listen to a lot of music, I do pay very close attention to life, and people living it. And thankfully I've got a good group around me that know the numbers, know the math and music, and they've been very helpful at encouraging or guiding songcrafting for Good Gets Better, and I think it's a much more musical record than Verses was, while still maintaining the story forms. So,
well, talking about community, I was talking with your drummer the other day about something y'all have going on called Joint Venture.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that some?
I do want to talk about Joint Venture. Well, that's a great piggyback on what we were just talking about as far as being involved in the music community and being smarter about the way that you play or write music. Joint Venture more or less is a jazz band, jazz standards, not experimental jazz. Jazz standards, like Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, Dean Martin stuff, and even all the way up into Norah Jones and Michael Bublé, some contemporary jazz, whatever they are. And we hope to play a lot of weddings. We hope to play a lot of corporate events or outings or whatever is going to pay us our rate. It's a way to get away from the singer-songwriter thing a little bit and experiment more with how music is actually created. The standards are brilliant. I mean, that songwriting is spectacular, and that is teaching me a great deal. And it's teaching me a great deal about playing guitar, because I don't play jazz. Everyone else does. Burt Willis is a jazz student at UTA. Nathan Ziem has his jazz degree. Karina Michaela has her jazz degree. Ryan Poole was a competitive jazz piano player and has a degree in music business. And so they're all just like super brainy, really great players, and they're great on the spot, and they understand the stories and the musical stories, anyways. And so I'm lucky to tag along with that, but since I get to do a lot of the business end of things, they keep me around for it. And I've got a lot of experience, working in wedding bands, since I used to manage one when I was living in Austin, which is a story for another day. That's some wild stuff. Joint venture is just that. It's a way for us to, to make a little bit of extra money for our band members, because the coffee shop and the bar gigs just don't pay very well. And I want to keep them around as long as I can, but I can't afford to just doing that. And so we came to the arrangement of, tell you what, you guys are going to play for super cheap at the bar gigs, but I'm going to pay you really well for these corporate gigs when they come. And then on the other side of that, it is sharpening. It's a very good musical experience, especially for me, because they all know the stuff so well, and I'm really they're pulling me along really quickly.
Yeah.
We played in Lake Jackson, Texas this past week, which is south of Houston, pretty close to the Gulf, and it was an hour and a half of jazz standards, and I had to solo over stuff, and I learned all the chords in several different positions and different inversions and stuff, and then when I started playing them with the piano player and with the bass player, I realized that I was totally wrong about all of it, and I had to relearn it, and so I essentially learned twice as many chords than I needed to, so I thought. And then soloing is still just way over my head at this point. Like, how to
jazz soloing is so it's a completely different mindset. I feel like if musical is like a left brain, like you have to find like a right brain kind of mentality for it that goes along with jazz.
Yeah, it's so analytical. It's not just feeling. It's mathematics. It's this works here because of this. And I'm sure there are shortcuts to learning that, but I don't want to just learn the shortcuts and be good at it. I want to understand why this fits in that form. I want to know why this goes with this chord, or why it modulates and how it modulates from F to F sharp, like Girl from Ipanema. It's like, why does it just modulate a half step and then come back?
Yeah.
And it does it all the time, and it's so smooth and it works. And it's fun stuff. It's really challenging for me, but we all get to wear really nice suits, and Karina's in a pretty dress, and we have a couple of sound guys that work for us, that sound great. So it's a pretty high-level production. It really is. It's much higher-level production than our other stuff because it pays so much more, and we can do that. The problem is that I'm not very good at it, so I'm having to put my grind to the fire, so to speak, and bring myself along pretty quickly so that I don't get left behind too much.
Well, one thing that you were also kind of mentioning was a little bit of a record label. Mm-hmm. And was that also a joint venture as well, or?
Close. Joint venture is essentially a part of that.
Okay.
But I've been thinking about doing this for a while. A friend of mine in Arkansas, Abby Robbins, created a record label called Morning Bird Records, and she represents several different artists as well as herself.
Yeah.
And after talking to her about that, the reason she did that was so that there was a very solid community. It wasn't just friends, but it was an actual symbiotic business relationship.
Yeah.
They have a Twitter account that they share, and they can use Morning Bird Records, as a side promotion for themselves. And so
that's cool.
Rather than me saying like, hey, I got a new record coming out or whatever, I can also use Flint Creek Records that says, hey, check out Zach Balch's new record, it gets better.
Yeah.
And it adds another dimension of promotion that doesn't seem like you're just all about yourself, but it seems like there's because that sucks so much.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't have a band name and you're just your own name, and you have to talk about yourself all the time. I hate doing that.
Yeah.
But that gives a little bit of an extra dimension to that. It's like, hey, check out Zach Balch's new record.
Yeah.
Or I can also say, hey, here's Karina Michaela's new record, without it sounding like, oh, hey, here's Karina. Because people just don't take that as seriously. But for whatever reason, there's just it legitimizes your efforts to say, like, we have this entity. It is a thing, and we're behind it, and we're a part of it, rather than just like, I'm on my own. And it has a different meaning. But apart from that, there's a more logistical reasoning behind it as well. It's more accountability for our band and all the people involved in it. It's an easier way to send out booking emails because now I can say, hey, I'm Zach with Flint Creek Records. This is my artist, Karina Michaela. She's touring through town, needs a place to play, yada yada.
Yeah.
And people at venues, even if they never heard of her, say, oh, Flint Creek Records, record label. That means that she must be somebody. She's a signed artist.
Yeah.
Or she'll help me out by saying, like, hi, I'm Karina with Flint Creek Records, representing Zach Balch. She's coming to town.
Yeah.
And it helps me a whole lot. And so the logistics of booking tours or contacting radio stations or publishing companies or any number of things becomes way more simplified. The goal is essentially that we have a lot of other friends jumping on board as well. We're already working with our friend Cole Reisner. He's a country songwriter that I've actually been playing guitar for recently. And not that he's on our label, but we've made the offer to say, hey man, if you need to book some extra gigs, use this email account and just use my name and say, hey, this is Zach from Flint Creek Records on behalf of Cole Reisner.
We didn't say that he is using his email and forging his name on that. We're just
sure, we didn't say that at all. But it is kind of it's a nice thing to do, just to say to legitimize our friends and what they're doing, and to let them know we're behind them. And now there is actually a legal precedent as well, because Flint Creek Records is an LLC filed with the state. My first taxes are due next month, so that kind of sucks. But you know what? It's an honor to pay taxes, so I'll do it.
Yeah.
But you know, if there are legal ramifications, you know, we are not protected by an LLC, rather than as a sole proprietor. We have contracts that have our watermark on it, which is kind of helpful, and we can send and receive faxes with it and everything else. And we even have an office in a co-op space here in Bellum at the Common Desk. So I rent I rent a chair at the Common Desk, and they've got free coffee for me all day long. And days that I'm in town and not in a session, or you know, working at the church or running around doing something else, that's where I am.
Yeah.
And it's really just a good place to sit and have a cup of coffee and email, without having Netflix tempting me all day long.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to work out of my house. So yeah, I mean, that's in a nutshell what Flint Creek Records is all about. The name comes from the creek that my family farm is built on, actually. Flint Creek, yeah.
Awesome. Well, going into talking about the records, you are actually producing a record, or not producing, you're recording your own record right now, and this is your sophomore album?
Yeah, it is.
Cool.
Technically no, but we're considering that it is. We've got other things that are older, but I'm not as particularly proud of the work. Not that everyone else didn't do a great job, but I myself, you know,
Yeah, because
I mean, that one.
You're really bringing in some, like you've already mentioned Tyler Martin, Andrew Sapolsky, Burt Willis, Ryan Poole, and Nathan Ziem.
Yeah.
You've brought in, as well as Aaron, how do you say his last name?
Haas.
It's not Haas. Aaron Haas. You've brought in this great team of musicians to create this really cool record. I got to sit in on some of the electric tracking, and man, it sounds so good.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's ridiculous. That was, you know, like I said, I gave up on considering myself a guitar player or a guitarist. I play guitar, and I'm not bad at it, but I'm not good at it either. And I'm trying, you know, I've been building up my gear and trying to learn a little bit, but I did not feel like I was ready to play on this record. And I'd known Tyler a while, and had worked with him on other projects, but hadn't gotten him on mine yet. And so we flew him in from Albuquerque. His wife Stephanie gave him up to me for a week, and I'm very grateful for that. But he was preparing for months ahead of time.
Yeah.
He didn't just sit down and slop something down. And even if he had, it would have been better than anything I came up with. But he not only worked that hard, but delivered when he came in. And it was beautiful, and it was brilliant, and it was perfect. You know, it's just fantastic. It's some of the best guitar work I've heard on a record.
Yeah.
Especially in DFW. I think it blows DFW records out of the water.
For real.
Just, I mean, and a lot of it was because Tyler was just so on point with it.
Yeah.
So good.
And even still, this is such a great band coming together.
Yeah,
and
it really is.
I mean, it really is just listening to even some of the drum ideas, because you're using two different drummers. You're using Nathan Ziem and Aaron Haas.
Well, Aaron Haas I actually brought on kind of as a co-producer.
Gotcha.
You know, he's had a baby recently. He was playing with a lot of other bigger bands that were making a lot more money for him.
Yeah.
But I couldn't imagine not doing a record without him, or doing a record without him. So, so I was like, hey man, I know you don't have a lot of time that you can pitch in to actually play on the thing.
Yeah.
But I want you involved. You know, what do you think about, you know, helping out with producing efforts and stuff? And he was able to, you know, partially commit to that. And so, you know, he's essentially a co-producer. But he has a great pop sensibility and really gets things, and he's also really good at holding those guys accountable, because he knows us all so well, and he knows what we're good at and what we kind of suck at. And so he was a great presence in the room, because it was easy for him to say, nope, do it again, I can do better, you know, without having to say, okay, that was good, let's try, you know. So it was just like, and he wasn't mean about it, but he was very upfront, and he didn't waste time saying like, all right, do better, you know. So he was good to have.
Because there's no time in the studio to really
Yeah.
to be
You're on a
that
crunch.
sensitive. You really, time is money.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, you know, you're still in that mode while you're recording. You know, it's like well, just pick it up, let's do it again.
So it was good to have him, and he did actually play drums on a couple of tracks.
Yeah.
You know, he wanted to make sure to get his stamp on the record, and we were happy to have it.
Yeah.
And it does give a completely different feel to a couple of the songs that he played on from what Nate was doing. You know, Nate's a great jazz player and has a lot of finesse and a lot of subtlety in his playing, and he does a lot of things that most drummers would never think of.
Yeah.
And that's really cool because that's what I wanted on this record, was a little bit more subtlety than on Versus, and a little bit more intricacy in fine details.
Yeah.
And Nate doesn't have a lot of studio experience, and so I know it was a very valuable lesson for him to be in there with us for a few days.
Yeah.
You know, working on the clock and against time and with a click and everything else, and so it's just a lot of experience for him that was just like, oh, I haven't done this yet.
Yeah.
And then Aaron, who's kind of a veteran studio player, and a very different kind of player, you know, he's very pocket, heavy hitter, real
Grooving.
real groovy kind of player, came in and sat down and knocked out a couple tunes in like 2 or 3 takes apiece. You know, it's just like, done. So it's kind of funny to watch. But it's cool because they're both just really different players. And now that we've heard some bounces from that initial tracking, you can hear like, oh, that's Aaron. Oh, that's Nate. You know, it's really fun.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky to have some different players, you know, on the same instrument.
Yeah.
Because it gives even extra depth to what we're doing, and it helps bring the songs out a little bit more.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool.
Cool. So how much is this all going? Like, I heard you paid for a little bit of this album yourself.
Yeah, I did. I had some gear to sell, which was always a bummer, but I had accumulated more than I really needed, so it was okay. And you know, I've been saving up gig money for half a year or so, CD sales, whatever, which isn't a lot. You know, people think like, oh, you can save for half a year. Not a lot. And then, you know, we had some money in the business account that we could put towards it as well. And even Karina Michaela kind of pitched in with some tip money that she'd saved and her gig money and some sales money too, because, you know, I helped to make her record a reality, and so she's kind of paying it forward and making sure mine gets done as well. So I did. I paid a lot out of pocket, but the good news is, you know, we've got the Kickstarter campaign going, and so hopefully a lot of that is recouped, and at the very least, hopefully everything else is paid for from here on out with the Kickstarter money.
Yeah, that Kickstarter was actually pretty incredible. I've been tracking its progress, and within the first couple of days, you reached over half.
Yeah, it was a pretty good start.
Yeah.
You know, and I think they usually are a pretty solid start, and then there's generally a plateau in the middle ground, and then things pick up and go crazy at the very end. And so far we're right on track for that. You know, we had half of the funds within 3 days.
Wow.
And then we've only made, you know, 600 since then, and that was a week ago. So I mean, it's definitely slowed down a considerable amount, but we're still moving forward, and that's good.
Yeah.
But we know that there are a lot of folks out there that still want to participate, and then some folks out there that may not know anything about it yet that would likely help if they knew it was a thing.
Yeah.
So the expectation is to fully fund the record, but the hope is that we will go above and beyond and have some extra to spend, either by, you know, replenishing my stash, my personal account, or maybe putting it into some PR stuff so that the record doesn't just sit there when it's done. That's always the fear, is that you're going to spend all this time and effort making a great record and then no one's ever going to hear it.
Yeah, not being able to put it on Spotify or, you know.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of sits in your hands and at shows and whatnot.
The big one that we're trying to accomplish with this one is radio. I mean, the last record, you know, just wasn't what radio stations are looking for, and so I kept that in mind, and I certainly wasn't writing for radio, because it's not a pop record at all. I mean, further from it than my last one even.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to have a couple of tunes that are a little closer to what, you know, maybe KXT would be interested in playing, or some other college stations or independent stations. You know, hope maybe some AAA stuff down the road as well, but that usually takes a little bit of investment to have somebody advocate for you, for those guys. So that part sucks.
Sure does.
At this point.
Well, all that to say that there is a Kickstarter for Zach, and I think you've got week and a half.
8 days left, maybe
8 days.
8 or 9 days.
Okay. Yeah, so we're looking at 8 or 9 days left, and so I mean, if you're watching this video, I will say, put my personal stamp on it. Zach really is an incredible person and a phenomenal musician, and you will be seeing him doing something in the future. He's extremely hardworking, and I have ridiculous respect for this guy.
Yeah, well, thanks.
And so, you know, if my stamp of approval means anything, just letting you know that, I mean, I love Zach and I love what he's doing. So if
Mustache
you can,
says it all, man.
Mustache says it all. If you can, please help out with Zach and the Kickstarter, because, dude, phenomenal band, phenomenal music.
It's a great band.
I wish everyone's got to have the experience with you that I've had, and
It's been good.
hopefully this interview kind of lets everyone get to know you a little bit better, see your heart, and
Yeah,
see
thanks.
that you're an incredible songwriter. In case if you didn't know, that song that opened up in the video, that's all Zach, and so you get to see a bit of his raw talent just chilling in his living room, kicking some guitar and lightening up those vocals, you know, and so
It's where they're made, right in here.
yeah. Well, dude, Zach, it's been awesome getting to talk
Yeah,
with you.
thanks. You gonna go check on T and then start talking about some gear?
Yeah, let's do it. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in.